Call committee members, please take their seats. Called to order the Investment Committee meeting of March 18th. Please call the roll.
Bill Slayton.
Here.
Rob Fechner.
Good morning.
Good morning. Margaret Brown.
Here.
Dana Hollinger.
Here.
Henry Jones.
Here.
Fiona Ma, represented by Frank Ruffino.
Should be here in a second.
David Miller.
Here.
Here.
Irena Ortega.
Here.
Represented by Ralph Cobb. Pardon me. Jason Perez. Mona Pascal Rogers.
Here.
Ramon Rubalcava.
Here.
Teresa Taylor. And Betty Yee.
Thank you very much. Last Friday, the world once again witnessed the destruction and infliction caused by terrorism. Nearly 70 people were killed or injured in mass shootings in 2 mosques in New Zealand. And just this morning, it was announced there was a tragedy aboard a tram in Utrecht, the Netherlands. And so on behalf of the board and the institution, we send our prayers and best wishes to those impacted and to the entire countries of New Zealand and the Netherlands. We'll move to approval of the March 18th, 2019 Investment Committee timed agenda. And without objection, I would move item 7B to after 9C. Because we're going to have a general discussion on divestment. So to take up the specifics of a divestment item, it made sense to do it after the briefing. So with that change, I look for a motion for approval of the timed agenda.
So moved.
A motion by Fechner, second by Hollinger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move to the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Vice Chair Fechner to lead us.
Hand over heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is the executive report, and just want to make a comment before they start. Committee members may notice that the materials, and I want to compliment the staff, the materials presented are concise and focused on the issues that are most important to us in our oversight role, and yet at the same time in addendums, detailed material is provided as well. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Chief Investment Officer, Ben Meng. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Investment Committee. We have several important items on the agenda this morning, including a number of items requesting action by this committee. So first, item 7B, the bill seeks to increase Calpers reporting on our engagement of emerging managers. Second, item 7B, the bill is about divestment of securities in private prisons. After item 7A and B, as the chair just directed, 7B will take place after 9C. So next in item 8A of the agenda, we'll continue the efforts of this committee and the staff over the last 18 months regarding changes to Calpers' private equity business model. Before we move on, I just want to underscore that requested action on item 8A is not an approval of any specific investment transaction or contract. Nor is it an override or exception to our existing investment policies. Rather, today's item asks the committee to affirm our commitment to updating Calpers' private equity business model through the addition of 2 new pillars. One focus on late-stage venture and growth strategy, and the other focus on a long-hold strategy. In the course of our deliberations over the past 18 months and the accompanying popular media commentaries and speculation, a certain degree of confusion has arisen in the financial markets, particularly in regards to our commitment to this project. So today's item, staff seeks affirmation from the committee regarding further exploration of Pillars 3 and 4, innovative options we believe could materially strengthen our fund. This affirmation is important, as we believe attempting to continue without it would compromise this important endeavor, leaving potential partners unsure of our intent. Your support for the further development of Pillars 3 and 4 today will help ensure Calpers is able to bring potential partners to the table. Now moving on to agenda item 9A and 9B, we will receive update from our corporate governance and sustainable investment teams. We'll hear how Calpers is leveraging our stakeholder rights in alignment with our governance and sustainability principles, and how we continue to integrate sustainability issues into our investment decision-making process. And finally, following up on the committee's request at the February meeting, we'll have an introductory overview of Calpers' active divestment mandates, as well as some additional exploration of how Wilshire Associates estimates the economic impact of this divestment on the portfolio. So now I would like to spend a few minutes on the recent fund performance. So the deck you have, the number is based on January, the end of January performance number. By the time of publish of this material, that was the data available to us. Now we have updated number as of the end of February. So as you may remember, last time was in December when Eric Beckson, who was an interim CIO during the interim period, the performance number he gives you as of the end of December, the fiscal year, the total fund return was negative 3.54%. I'm glad to report back to you that after 2 months, the first 2 months of 2019, the market has done very well, and so have we. So as of the end of February, the total fund return is a positive 1.62%. However, our required rate of return in the long run is 7%, so it means that we're still falling short of 5.4% to be made up in the remaining 4 months of this fiscal year. And yesterday we did a rough historical simulation, assuming that using the 60-40 portfolio means 60% of S&P 500, 40% of Barclay Ag. So what's the probability? If history is any guidance, we use the past 30-year data. So if history is any guidance, the probability for us to achieve 5.4% in the next 4 months is less than 30%. So that's our estimate of the using historical performance as a guidance. Also, it's important to note that private equity is the best performing asset class for this period. And also, private equity is on track to be the best performing asset class of the fiscal year, as well as the only asset class that will deliver 7% of return for this year. So just a reminder. And with that, that concludes my prepared remarks, and we are happy to answer any question that you may have.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see no questions at this point. We'll move to item 5, action consent, approval of the February 19th Investment Committee open session meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Let's see, who made the motion? Taylor made the motion, and who seconded it? And Mr. Miller seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I have not had a request to pull any items on information, information consent, so we'll move to item 7A, Assembly Bill 181. And Danny Brown is here. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Danny Brown, Calpers team member. AB 181 by Assemblymember Rodriguez would require Calpers and CalSTRS to submit a report to the legislature on the status of achieving our objectives and initiatives regarding the participation of emerging managers. The first report would be due by March 1st, 2020, and then filed every year thereafter until January 1st, 2024. In the way of historical background, in 2011, legislation by Senator Curran Price was enacted that required Calpers to develop a 5-year strategic plan to expand the participation of emerging managers across all asset classes and annually report on the progress. That reporting requirement ended on January 1st, 2018. So the purpose of this bill is really just to continue the reporting efforts started by Senator Price. For the most part, this reporting requirements are consistent with the annual reporting that our investment office has continued to provide the board as part of our Emerging and Transition Manager 2020 plan. We are recommending a support if amended position to remove the requirement that would require CalPERS to report on emerging managers that we have terminated in the annual report. And according to the author, he has already agreed to make that change. So with that, that ends my report.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I support this with the amendment because I don't think we should be evaluating in public reasons why people are dismissed. So I can support the amendment, and I applaud you for having this come back to continue that disclosure, because when it was first implemented by Price, it was a very worthy document because it shared the information, definitions, it showed what our policy was regarding our emerging manager program, and it was well received throughout the financial industry. So I'm glad to see that it's continued. So I would recommend the staff's approve staff's recommendation.
Okay. All right, that was a motion, Mr. Jones? Yeah, so moved by Jones, seconded by Taylor. I see no further people requesting to discuss, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And an abstention from, abstention from Mr. Cobb and Ms. Pasquale Rogers. 2 abstentions. All right, thank you very much. We'll move to now item 8A, because we moved 7B down after 9. So 8A, private equity business model. Mr. Mang, Mr. Cole, and Ms. Kaur. Is she going to?
Yes, I would like to ask my team members, Sarah and John, to come up to the table now. So item 8A follows roughly 18 months of discussion between staff and the committee on Calpers private equity business model. As I noted in my opening remarks, this item is presented to the committee for consideration as an action item to approve the concept of adding 2 new pillars to Calpers private equity business model and thereby empower your investment staff to address the next key phase in this project. It's important to note that this item does not constitute a change to our statement of investment policy, nor does it establish an exception to that policy. No contracts will be signed, nor any commitments made should you choose to approve the concept as recommended by the staff. None of the slides are new here, so I will not walk through them one by one. Instead, I would like to take this opportunity to bring the key concepts from the last 18 months together and then address some of the questions that have come up from our meetings with stakeholders. So in the past 18 months, we have discussed a number of key concepts. Some of them are highly technical from both the investment perspective and legal perspective. And we have tried a few different ways to explain these highly technical terms. And we'll continue to try to balance between being accurate and being understandable. Avoid adding further confusion to these concepts. As you will notice that the team today will stick quite close to our prepared scripts so that we can strike a right balance between being accurate and being understandable. So to tie all these concepts together, I would like to break down our reasoning into a number of steps. So first step, all our stakeholders and the staff share the same goal, which is to deliver promised return. And then the second step is how do we accomplish that goal? To do that, we know we must invest in a risk-aware manner and deliver 7% rate of return over the long run. We also need to know ourselves. We need to play to our strengths and our comparative advantages. As I stated in my remarks at the January offset, Calpers' key competitive advantage are our size, our brand, and our improved liquidity profile. So how do we monetize on these competitive advantages to help us in achieving our required rate of return? So that leads to step number 3 in our reasoning process. So the answer through private equity to increase our chance of achieving the 7% required rate of return. We need private equity as an asset class because of the superior expected rate of return, as well as its strong track record over time in history in the past. In addition, private equity's realized volatility and the drawdowns tend to be lower than expected, which provides some diversification benefit to the portfolio, as well as downside protection to the portfolio. As I discussed last month, looking at where we are in the economic cycle today, which is late in the cycle, I prefer private equity over public equity. Well, all asset classes are currently rich, meaning highly valued. Relatively speaking, private equity is probably the better place to be given our liquidity profile. So, as I said last month, we need private equity to be successful. We need more of it, and we need it sooner rather than later. So that leads to our step number 4 in our reasoning process. So, but we need private equity. We have the conventional existing business model. Why are we here today proposing an addition of alternative business model? And the reason is that there are challenges we have with the conventional business model. The first is our size. We cannot access private equity exposure on the scale that we need. And then there are characteristics of the conventional private equity business model that are suboptimal in terms of our needs, namely the higher fees, lower transparency, and relatively lower control. So then in step 5 of our reasoning, so how can we tackle these challenges in a way that plays to our comparative advantages? So which brings us to the proposed business model, namely the addition of pillars 3 and 4. Pillars 3 and 4 are designed to mitigate those characteristics of the conventional private equity business model that do not serve our interest. We expect these new vehicles to improve our ability to deploy assets in private equity opportunities so we can invest more in private equity. And over time, to lower cost, as well as improved both Calpers' level of control over and the transparency concerning our private equity exposure so we can make better investment decisions, contributing to the long-term sustainability of the fund. Please note that, as we will elaborate further in later slides, but please note that the improved transparency is to your investment professionals at Calpers. The general public will get exactly the same level of transparency as they do today. So Pillar 3 and 4 will allow us to play to our strengths, namely our brand, our scale, and our ability to invest in illiquid assets. It is our professional belief that the proposed new business model is the best option available to us at this time to monetize our comparative advantages and to increase our chance of success. So now to the step 6 of our reasoning process. The new business model is not without risk. We have identified a number of benefits of the proposed business model. However, as we have consistently maintained, and as I stated last month, this new model is not without risks. As we know that no investment is without risk, but we can be smart and intelligent about risk-taking, namely that we take risk where we have comparative advantages and we avoid risk where we lack such advantages. the proposed business model represents this form of intelligent risk-taking. I believe the key risk of the proposed business model will be in the implementation details, particularly in regard to the governance structure and alignment of interest. Should you choose to approve the concept today, staff will move on to the second phase of this project, which is to identify and assess these risks and find ways to mitigate such risks. I'm very glad to see that the staff has adopted the most risk-prudent approach, and we will only proceed on our own terms and on our own timeline. We will not commit to any artificial timeline, nor to any forced or arbitrary outcome. We will continue to move in step with our beliefs, our policies, and our investment disciplines. So, as I stated last month, the new business model may or may not work, and it may or may not work now, but we will not know if we don't try. And it is in this challenging capital market environment, we owe it to all our stakeholders to explore all the options available to us. So, while no one knows all that the future holds, we do have certainty in some things. One, the landscape for institutional investors continue to grow more and more competitive. And two, more companies are staying private for longer, and it will become more difficult to deliver the required rate of return in the next 10 years than in the past 10 years. We need to adapt as the market opportunities evolve around us so we can stay competitive. We know that private equity is the only asset class is expected to exceed the 7% accurate rate of return. Foregoing opportunities to increase our access may lower our chance of generating the returns required to pay promised benefits. As we know that we will not compromise our principles in pursuit of this new business model. So today we are asking for your approval of the Pillars 3 and 4 concepts so that the staff can continue with the next phase of this project. The public deliberation of this new business model over the past 18 months has generated some confusion with our stakeholders and in the financial markets, leaving some uncertain of Calpers' commitment to this concept. The affirmation of Calpers' commitment to pursuing Pillars 3 and 4 today is an important signal to the financial markets and to potential partners that we are serious about this project. Again, this action requested from the committee today does not constitute the signing of any contract, nor the deployment of a single dollar. It does not supersede the existing investment policy. Should the committee take action to affirm the concept of Pillar 3 and 4 as part of our private equity business model, staff will return with periodic progress update, any required revision to the board's investment policy, and the prudent personal opinion will be shared prior to any actual investment in Pillar 3 and 4. So as I stated earlier, we would also like to take this opportunity to address some of the questions that have arisen in the course of Calpers' exploration of this proposed PE business model. And in total, we tallied about 10 questions from stakeholders, and including you. I will take the first 6, and then I turn over to Sarah to talk the last 4. So the first question was, does Calpers intend to stop co-investments? Simply put, the answer is no. Co-investment have always been part of Calpers' private equity strategy, and that will continue under Pillar 2, the existing business model, and where we'll be exploring alternative ways of implementing co-investments. And as I stated last month as well, and as a matter of fact, we're bringing our internal study on co-investment back to you next month in April. So the second question is, some have asked, can we just bring it in-house or adopt the Canadian model? So as we discussed in February, there are those who say that we should not pursue Pillar 3 and 4 as proposed, but rather that we should simply bring those models and expertise in-house and hire the staff, or adopt a model similar to that in use in Canada. So regarding the Canadian model, We evaluated that option, and it is clear that it's not viable for us at this time. We must also, as I said last month, that we must learn how to walk before we can run. Calpers, as of today, simply does not have the organizational structure nor the compensation options capable of matching what top-tier managers can secure in the private sector. Another fact is that we are not located in a global financial center, which seriously hinder our ability in attracting and retaining the top talents. However, we remain open-minded and will consider the Canadian model if and when it becomes a viable option. Until then, our duty to deliver the promised benefit to our beneficiaries remains. I believe that we, as the stewards of the system, owe it to our beneficiaries to explore all options available to us today, especially those options that play to our competitive advantages, like the model that staff is proposing now. The third question is about owning it and control. So there appears to have been some confusion, and at some point a narrative has started that Calpers will own the partners associated with Pillar 3 and 4, and this is simply not the case. So I break down this question into a few sub-questions. The first question, what ownership structure do we contemplate for Pillar 3 and 4 now? So Pillar 3 and 4 contemplates the formation of a new investment vehicle in the form of a limited liability company, LLC. Our ownership interest for each pillar will take the form of a non-managing member interest in the LLC. The management company we select will serve as the LLC's managing member. The second sub-question related to this, how is this different from a typical PE commingled fund investment? The term commingled refers to a situation in which we are only one among many investors, and there are times over 100 investors, so we are one of the many investors. That's the current conventional business model, the commingled fund. As currently contemplated, Pillar 3 and 4 will be captive investment vehicles, meaning that Calpers will at least initially be the sole non-managing member supplying the lion's share of the capital to the LLC. The managing company for each investment vehicle will, as the managing member, round out the remainder of the commitment to the investment vehicle. The other sub-question is, will we have an ownership in the management company? That's another misunderstanding. Simply put, the answer is no. The management company will be separately owned and operated. We will not own or control the management company. Another question that may arise is, how can we reduce cost if we do not own the management company? The answer is that we will structure the new vehicles, in such a way that the reduced cost is embedded in the structure of these new vehicles. Namely, we are adopting a pre-approved budget approach as opposed to paying a fixed management fee and by paying reduced performance fee. The other sub-question related to this is, how will the management company be compensated? In lieu of a management fee, Calpers will make a periodic payments based on a pre-approved budget to fund the operations of the investment vehicle and the management company. In addition, the management company will earn an appropriate long-term economic incentive that aligns our investment partners with our best interest. The fourth question about the transparency. As we just said earlier, these new vehicles will afford more transparency to Calpers, not less. I would like to take this opportunity to underscore the issue of transparency. Some seem to think that Calpers is seeking to reduce the level of information available to the public through these new vehicles. That is absolutely not the case. To this, I would like to remind us all of three things. The information protected as proprietary, that is, information for which a public discussion would impair the system's investment objectives and threaten our ability to pay promised benefits, would continue to be protected. And the information that is legally required to be made available to the public will remain available. This new business model proposes no change to the information available to our stakeholders. However, the proposed business model does intend for more information to be made available to your investment professionals as fiduciaries with duties of loyalty and care to help strengthen our ability as investors. The other sub-question related to transparency is legal agreements remain protected or not? The question is yes. So a question has been raised as to whether or not the contracts with our Pillar 3 and Pillar 4 partners would be made public. And under today's law, in the interest of our ability to be effective investors, they would not be public. Instead, they would remain protected proprietary documents. The other sub-question related to transparency is about fee and expense. The current business model contemplates that Calpers, as a non-managing member responsible for operating payments, will review and approve the fund's budget on an annual basis. Lease budget payment will be provided to the public. However, the breakdown between salaries, rent, and accessory will not be provided. As we have attempted to explain in the past, however, we expect a new model to afford an improved level of transparency to Calpers and to provide at least the same level of transparency to the public as under the current model. The fifth question we received is about control. Similar to transparency, we'll have more control in Pillar 3 and 4 than we currently have in Pillar 2, the conventional co-investment model. In the current model, the board, controls the investment activity in our portfolio via controlling Calpers' investment policy statements, as well as through the authority you have delegated to staff. But in today's private equity model, our staff has little control over the investment made by commingled private equity funds in which we invest. In the newly proposed model, the first two elements remain the same, with primary control held by the board, by you, through the control of our investment policy and the powers delegated to staff. But when it comes to the selection of investment, using this new business model, the captive vehicle approach, Calpers would have more control over setting fund-level investment guidelines that fit within the parameters and limits set by the board, and by having an option to terminate the vehicle under certain circumstances. So again, as with transparency, in the new business model, we'll have more transparency, we'll have more control, not less. The sixth question raised is about my involvement. I would like to speak to those who would question my level of involvement as a newly appointed CIO with the concepts we are addressing today. So I can assure you that I have been fully and appropriately in the loop on this project for quite some time, and I'm fully briefed in terms of where we are today and how we got here. In fact, I was an early believer in this concept. Following the discussion as a global peer with Calpers began publicly, when Calpers began publicly thinking about the new business model. And when it became clear I would be returning to Calpers in September, I engaged the senior team at Calpers to deepen my understanding of and contributed to the exploration of these issues and new business model. And also, I have reviewed in depth all the studies and analysis conducted by the staff in the past 18 months. So now that's the first 6 questions. Now I would like to turn over to Sarah to answer the last 4 questions before we open up for questions.
Thank you, Sarah Core, Investment Office staff. So some questions were asked about the valuations in the private equity portfolio and whether or not they're overstated. We considered it extremely unlikely for a few reasons, including that valuations are reviewed by independent valuation experts for most of the funds that we invest in. And additionally, it's been our experience that upon the sale of the assets, that the proceeds received are higher than the previous carrying value of the assets. Secondly, we were asked whether or not Pillar 4 with a longer hold period would impede its success. So we're not dictating that the assets get held longer. We are providing the general partner or the managing member with the ability to opt to hold them longer than in a traditional private equity fund. Some have questioned where the location of the Pillar 3 and 4 offices would be. Calpers is not going to dictate where they would be. They would be wherever the managing member feels it would be most appropriate given the strategy that they're pursuing. And finally, has Calpers investigated other options that would be a potential for Pillar 3 and 4? And as Ben stated, we believe that we owe it to our stakeholders to consider all options and recognize that not all will be viable or scalable, but we are exploring other options available to us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ben to close.
Thank you, Sarah. Just on the appraisal, one of the questions raised was that, other appraisal in private equity portfolio tend to be inflated. And as Sarah mentioned, that is extremely unlikely. For one, there's an established industry practice with auditing process in place. And for two, from our past observation, GPs tend to undervalue their investment in the portfolio. So they would like to surprise the LPs on the upside when they truly exit the investment. And thirdly, that GP is not compensated based on the interim valuation. Neither their management fee nor their performance fee is based on the interim valuation. So now I will take the opportunity to address the last question raised is there seems to be some concern that we have changed our narratives over the past 18 months. So I would like to address that. Generally speaking, I would like to say that changes are good, especially when we explore innovation concepts as Pillar 3 and Pillar 4. It is the nature of innovation and experimentation is to discover what works and what doesn't, and then we adjust our course of action accordingly. Both John Maynard Keynes and Paul Samuelson, two renowned economists in history, have said something along the lines that when my information changes, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? So for that, I applaud our staff's action in adjusting their position as we learn. It again shows that the staff is committed to finding the best approach for Calpers by incorporating the new pieces of information as we discover them. It shows that the staff is not preoccupied with any misconceived concept of saving face or being too rigid, too entrenched in our thinking to explore new and superior options when they appear. So in addition to the questions we just walked through, we have received a number of letters from stakeholders, some supporting the proposed business model and some voicing concerns or confusions regarding it. We have reviewed them all carefully, and our professional judgment remains the same, that it is prudent for Calpers to continue to the second phase of this project. Should the committee approve the action item today, we would continue to report back to you periodically to give you a progress update, which include the expense outside of the approved INVO budget. Further, I would like to emphasize that should the path to the right implementation be identified, full implementation will not proceed without a series of decisions and input from the committee. For example, determining the scale of each pillar if it is outside of a delegated authority, revising the board's statement of investment policy to reflect the business model, and as noted in agenda item, provision of a prudent personal opinions to the committee prior to funding any investment in Pillar 3 and 4. So again, I would like to reiterate that today's action is not approve any one deal or revise our investment policy. At the end of today, there are no new contracts and no dollar being put to work in Pillar 3 and 4. Rather, the item asks the committee to affirm Calpers' commitment to the continued exploration of an enhanced private equity business model through the addition of two new pillars. One focused on late-stage venture and growth strategy, and the other focusing on a long-term hold strategy. So with that, thank you very much, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In order to move us forward and to put on the table for discussion, I would like to offer a motion. I move the following. The investment committee approved pillars 3 and 4 in concept and directs staff to include them in the update in the private equity strategic business model. The committee directs the staff to develop the structure and guiding principles of the new pillars to be in compliance with the board's investment beliefs and policies. The committee recognizes that staff may propose policy changes for the committee's approval. Staff will seek to identify and negotiate with capable partners. Expenditures on development of pillars 3 and 4 will be managed within the existing INVO budget. The committee will receive, at a minimum, quarterly progress reports. And lastly, prior to committee approval of any final implementation and funding plan, staff will supply the committee a prudent person opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I have a motion for Mr. Fechner, a second from Ms. Hollinger. Is that right? I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor. Thank you very much. Sorry. All right, motion's on the floor. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you, Mr. Yang, for this really clear presentation. Helped me get through a lot of the questions I think that we've had before. I did have one final question for Ms. Kaur, just real quick. You had mentioned that you have investigated all other options and they're either not viable or scalable. Can you give us some samples of that?
So I wouldn't say that we explored all other options. We have explored
other options.
Other options. There's.
I didn't write all. I just said all.
We've looked at doing different co-investment strategies. We've looked at some other options for some separate accounts. We are pursuing some of those, but they to scale up to the between $10 billion that we need to deploy annually. We need other options besides co-investments and separate accounts.
Okay, and we're doing co-investments in addition to pillars 3 and 4, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Again, I want to thank you for this very expansive and well-explained report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Controller Yee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also, too, want to just thank the staff for just providing a little bit more of the detail about what's behind the concept, and appreciate that part of exploration and potential experimentation is going to be just trying to incorporate new information as we learn it. So I do appreciate that. But I wanted to just kind of go back to a couple things. One, just in terms of kind of what's been presented to us over the course of the last period of months. And I'm trying to think about this, and it's been so focused on the two pillars that I'm finding myself now trying to back up and just see how does this all fit with respect to our entire portfolio. And so when I do that, it gets me to think about, obviously, what's the impact going to be potentially on providing relief to employer contribution rates. And I know one of the slides that gave me some concern last month was one that showed that increasing the allocation to private equity impacts projected average employer rates, I think plus or minus 3 percentage points was the slide. So that gets me thinking about how to look at this, and that is we're taking on a larger risk for a future benefit that likely will not move the needle with respect to providing any relief on contribution rates. But and this is kind of my problem. We're kind of looking at this kind of a little bit in a vacuum, but so that's one issue. I think Mr. Cole at one point had talked about Pillar 4 not likely to lower costs in the short run or outperform the market, so that's kind of another aspect. And then I don't know that we've heard much about Pillar 3 with respect to expected returns, but I guess I have a little bit of skepticism about buying later stage venture companies that likely will be able to beat the market. But again, that's an unknown. And then I was curious as to why Makita was not given an opportunity to provide an opinion memo. But this is where I have asked for, and I think part of my discomfort around this is that as you're exploring that we haven't been able to kind of just get a little more independent opinions along the way. So regardless of the outcome of the motion, I would hope that we can have greater involvement from our consultant in real time with respect to the evolving strategy, and such as providing opinion memos on the agenda items and just getting information more real time. And then the thing that I really do hope we do get, because we are talking about new structures, new relationships, potentially new governance, and I would hope that this committee would entertain a second fiduciary council opinion from a council with deeper investment experience. I mean, I think we're at that point now of where we just need to understand our ongoing relationship as fiduciaries with this strategy and model, and you've described some of that already. So I guess given all of that, I still have concerns. But I guess the more immediate concern is, and I would, Mr. Chairman, like to invite Makita to come up and give some remarks, if possible, after this.
Ms. Yee, when I was reviewing the materials last week, and I've only been chair since February, and I failed to notice until Friday that there was not a Makita letter in the package. So I made contact with Makita. We had a conversation, and in fact, they did produce a letter which was delivered this morning, maybe in all the material that
yes, I have it in front of me. Yes.
Yeah, so that's their opinion letter, and we can certainly hear from them this morning as well.
Okay. Yeah,
But I apologize for it not getting out in the package earlier in the week. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Steve Hart from Makita Investment Group. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I think as staff has described, there is a lot of thought going into this opportunity here today, and that as we have spoken and the staff has spoken several times as this item has been thought about, that given the opportunities and that Calpers has and the challenges that it faces in order to deploy at scale, we continue to believe that the exploration of Pillars 3 and 4 make a lot of sense, and that is something that staff should continue on. We've heard today that staff's intention here is to continue that exploration, to do it in a way that they will periodically report back to the board, and that today's action is not one that they're looking to seek approval for a particular investment strategy or partner at this point. So I think that this makes a lot of sense, and that the way staff is approaching it makes sense, and they've articulated the particular objectives and goals that they would like to try to achieve as part of this exploration of Pillars 3 and 4 to help guide them philosophically about how they're going about doing it. So I'm happy to discuss anything further.
Okay, why don't you stick around, because there may be some other questions.
Sure.
And Controller Yee, are you?
Just one more,
Sure.
if I could. And not for open session, but maybe just a question about the plan terms as you see them evolving. But do you have like any basic parameter of what plan terms may look like at this point, or is that still really? I mean, obviously not going into specifics, but just...
We have some idea, ideally, what will work for us. But without further exploration, we don't know whether it's working in today's market or not. And the details, what we are thinking, maybe this afternoon we can discuss.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the report and your comments today. However, I still have concerns. In December, we got a due diligence report. I won't go into what was in that, but we actually never got answers to those outlined risks. BCG, the consultant, basically outlined the risks and had some mitigation measures. Questions were asked, and we had no responses to those, and we still don't have responses to those. And I really think it's important that it was a 41-page addendum that was in closed session. So it would be helpful to get those answers before we make a decision. Also, I had requested information on co-investments and secondaries. I assume that's coming. Also, on what sort of fees and carry we're paying. Just like Ms. Yee said, it might be a closed session discussion. But again, we need to know that these pillars are going to increase returns, net returns, and that the costs will be down. My other concern was back in January, Calpers held a press conference. I believe Mr. Cole and Mr. Ming, you were in that conference, and it's been reported to me that Mr. Cole told reporters that staff didn't need approval from the board to move forward with Pillars 3 and 4. Merely staff needed a change to the delegated authority. My concern is if we approve Pillars 3 and 4 today, that staff could merely implement this as long as they stayed under the $2 billion delegated authority, that staff could move forward and do agreements. And that's a very big concern for me, and I want to hear you confirm that you're not going to do that you're not going to do Pillars 3 or 4 and stay under the delegated authority.
Thanks for the question, Ms. Brown. So I'll answer the first three. The last one probably for John and our general counsel to answer. In terms of you mentioned in December, the open questions that we still haven't answered yet, because that's exactly what we're asking for today for approval concept so that we can continue with the second phase. We can discover what are the terms and conditions may work for us and what are the risk mitigates of each measures. The second question, you're absolutely right, the co-investment, last one you asked, as I said in opening remark, we plan to bring co-investment study back to you next month in April. The third question, yes, there is the intent to increase the net return of the total fund by having the Pillar 3 and Pillar 4 together. And the last one, you're asking about John's comment at the general offset as the media briefing. I turn that over to, in terms of delegated authority, what kind of approval we need from this body. I'll turn that over to John and probably our general counsel, Matt Jacobs, as well.
John Cole, Calpers staff. I think it's important to note that throughout the process of reviewing the strategic model and in presenting these alternatives, we have said and commit publicly and often that in order to go to the next stage, which today's motion would address, that we would continue to engage and report to the board at any level. So the interview you're referring to makes the distinction between, if you read specifically what is necessary given our policies, that delegated authority is specifically required for an exception that would lead to a larger commitment and investment. But our intention has been and will continues to be that because these are different, because we spent nearly 2 years discussing them, that whatever amount might be dedicated in these new directions would be together with the board. It would be our decisions.
So I just want to hear that we're not going to be doing multiple Pillar 3, multiple Pillar 4 under $2 billion. Is that correct?
I want to be very clear that as we go along and we have gone to the market and understand what it would be possible in both Pillars 3 and 4, the notion which we laid out initially of the long-term plan that talked about $10 billion committed over 10 years in each of the two pillars was meant to give a sense of what the future would look like. And as a result, in simple terms, it came across or comes across as that might be done in a singular vehicle. What I want to make clear is that we could choose to do multiple vehicles but the idea would be to do it at a scale that ultimately would be that size. So I don't, it's premature for us to be able to say that there will only be one vehicle.
Yeah, so if I may second, I just add to that, we don't know yet. And this may get into our negotiation strategy, so I would rather save this discussion for the afternoon.
Sure. The concern I have, though, is that the strategy has been sold to us on two separate large pools, so we can have that we would have just two, one Pillar 3 and one Pillar 4. My concern is if you ended up doing 5 Pillar 3s and 5 Pillar 4s, all less than $2 billion, with this approval today, you could move forward under the current delegated authority. And that's a concern I have, and I want to hear you commit today that that's not what you're going to do.
Ms. Brown?
We commit to that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's clear in the motion, regardless of the sizes, that this new structure is going to come back to us.
Great. Can you tell me about the role of the OCIO in investments? Up until December with Ms. Berkey here, her name had been on the agenda items, and now I don't see Mr. Dan, I can't pronounce Benviedo's on the agenda items. So I don't understand, because my understanding is that the OCIO's role, that they can actually not necessarily veto an item, but they're supposed to check and make sure that everything's okay, and I don't see the OCIO on the agenda item.
So, Mr. Jones, you would like me to answer that question, or?
Yes.
Okay. So the current setup, the COIO have two main areas of responsibility. One is the operation part and the compliance part. And when Dan Bienvenu became the interim COIO, we made a conscious decision that to carve out the compliance part to be under Eric Beckson, so that because Dan Bienvenu is wearing two hats, the MID, or the head of global equity, as well as the interim COIO. So we would like him to continue to opine on investment decisions. And in order to do that, we decided to carve out the compliance function from Dan Bienvenu under Eric Beckson. And that's why when you see signing the agenda items, if it's under global equity, you see Dan Bienvenu's name. If it's under operations, you see Dan Bienvenu's name. But if it's under compliance, you see Eric Beckson's name first, and then Dan Bienvenu, and then mine. And with that, I would like to also call on Marlene, our Chief Compliance Officer, come up to explain the reasoning behind the setup as for the interim period.
Good morning, Marlene Timberlake-Diadamo, Chief Compliance Officer, Calpers. So the question I think that Ben is asking is, what is the role? Maybe why don't you repeat the question, Ben?
So the question is the role of the COIO, particular part of the independent check of the COIO role in terms of signing the agenda item, or whether he or she agrees or disagrees with the agenda item.
So what you have outlaid is that typically the COIO role has several different activities and functions under its purview. And with Dan serving in the interim role, the compliance function it was determined that needed to be separate. And so the compliance function was moved to Eric Beckson, so that is separated from the investment activities and the investment decisions that are occurring. And that Dan could act in his capacity as the managing investment director for global equity. So I think what Ben has said is that when it comes to the review of the COIO, Eric is doing the compliance functions and operational risk, and Dan is doing everything else. Does that answer the question?
And would you like to elaborate on the three lines of defense?
Sure. So the operational model that Calpers operates on right now is what's called 3 lines of defense. And for those of you that have been on the board for a few years, you have seen this laid out in the Risk and Audit Committee materials, where we talk about who sits in the first line, who sits in the second line, and who sits in the third line. And the model itself is a model that is used by a lot of regulated entities, because it is meant to really sort of matrix, I'll say, the roles and responsibilities, and really to be able to provide independent checks on certain activities. First line of defense sits within the business, and that is because those are the folks that are the closest to the risk. Their responsibility is to identify, assess, manage, and mitigate those risks. But they sit in the what I call the vertical, or essentially the business line. Second line of defense is really meant as an independent overseer of that first line. And the thinking is that first line is supposed to escalate, manage risk. They're the closest to the risk. They understand the risk. Second line is meant to provide oversight over that risk, and it's independent, so it doesn't report to the same vertical. So for instance, enterprise compliance sits as a second line function. I report to Marcy Frost. First line of defense sits within the business, and they report up to the COIO, as we just talked about, and ultimately to Ben. Third line of defense is your audit function. And so the idea is that those three lines operating together are in the best possible position to help identify, manage, and mitigate risk, and also to provide independent outlets for concerns or activities, and just to make sure that things are running the way that they're supposed to.
I appreciate the answer, although there's no OCIO. Eric Baggeson didn't sign this agenda item either, so it's a problem for me. Thank you.
The one thing, Dan Bienvenu, acting COIO, the one thing I would add to it is that I do still see all the items. Having not signed it, I would have gladly signed it. We just decided to route it in the way we did. I do see all agenda items in an initial folder that comes around, number one. And number two, I think some of you are aware of some of the governance structures we have in the investment office around what we call our investment strategy group, or our ISG. We consciously had me delegate the role of the voting member for global equity to John Cole. And when I sit in the investment strategy group, I actually sit as the COIO, which is where I have that sort of veto ability that if there's something that gives me pause, I can stop it. So I hope that helps.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hollinger.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's important for everyone to put this in context. I sit on a global board where we represent $34 trillion in assets. I just got back from the Women in Private Equity Conference. I can tell you that every sovereign wealth fund, every institutional investor, I sat with Dallas Teachers, Texas Retirement, STRS, we are all looking to increase our allocation to this asset class. And typically, it's more than double the current allocation, even foundations. I think we have to also recognize the danger going forward of flat returns for this fund. Flat returns will increase the unfunded liability, employer contribution rates. So in context of a global picture, we used to have 8,000 public companies to invest in. We now have less than 4,000. How do you deploy at scale? So we have to think outside of the box. The role of leadership in an organization is to think about what you could be doing. Not what you're doing, because what we're doing isn't going to move the needle. So, Ben, I applaud your leadership. John, Marcy, the investment team, because they are proactively acting like leaders and moving us forward into the future to think about what we could be doing. So thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank Ben and staff for the clarity in terms of responding to the number of questions that have been raised by the board and by our stakeholders, including those that I received and forwarded to you yesterday. So I appreciate that. I don't think it's a question of whether or not we need to invest in private equity. I think we all concluded that this is one of the highest asset returning classes, and that we need to do more because we haven't been able to scale to bring in more returns from that category. I think all of what I'm hearing is more or less around process and policy. And so a number of the responses that you made this morning to those questions deal with the process. And also some of the questions that were raised this morning were dealing with policy issues, some of which cannot be discussed here in open session. They have to be deferred to closed session. So I concur with Ms. Hollinger that you're doing the right thing, and I think we should move forward with this if we are going to try and achieve those goals of beating our actuarial rate of 7% return. And it's been given that this is one of the asset classes that can do that. And I do think, though, we need to, in closed session, respond to a couple of questions that Ms. Brown and Ms. Yee asked. So given that, I can certainly be supportive of moving this forward.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Treasurer Ma.
Thank you very much. So I just got here. This is my third month, and it was very hard for the last 2 months to figure out really what was happening. So I appreciate also the clarity coming to my office, answering the questions, many questions that my staff and I had, and even the 10 clarification questions today was very, very helpful. I understand better now what you are all trying to do. I have also talked to many folks in the private equity realm and feel comfortable that the returns are exceeding what we are getting in the other asset classes. I also agree that we should be exploring, like Ms. Hollinger said, any type of options that are going to get us to or over the 7% return. And I agree with Ms. Yee that we should include Makeda, our consultants, in discussions, because that's why they're here, is to also be that check and balance and advise us as well. So I do have 2 questions in the motion and 4 recommendations or things that I would like the board to think about adding into the motion. But my first question is in paragraph 3. What is expenditures on development of pillars 3 and 4 will be managed within the existing INVO budget? What does that mean?
INVO is a short. There's so many acronyms in Calpers. I'm still learning after almost 7+ years here. INVO stands for Investment Office. So that every year we get to approve the budget. And on the budget note, probably the best for Dan Bienvenu, the interim head of COIO, to talk about the investment office, the budget for the investment office, and what our intended plan to carry out should you choose to approve the concept today for the next phase.
Okay, because I also heard that there would be no new contracts to be signed at this time, no new dollar amounts allocated. So that's why having this vague expenditures will be managed. Are we going to spend money or not going to spend money?
So we're talking about 2 things. That no dollar means no investment dollar will be deployed. And the fees and expense, we're talking about the second phase, like the operating expense, to find the right, to identify the right partners, and then to work out the desired governance and the economic terms. So that is the expense in terms of as an operating expense. But we will not spend any dollar on investment or deploy any dollar on investment. So these are investment expense and operating expense. So then Bienvenu will talk about the operating expense.
Okay.
And what I was talking about this morning is no investment dollar will be deployed.
Okay. So I would like to see that added to the resolution. But my concern is that there's money being spent and we are not being told how much money is being spent. And then at the end, when we finally do ask, it was X amount, and because we didn't ask for those expenditures, like if you were going to report to us on a quarterly progress report, I would also like you to let us know how much you've been spending internally on this concept.
Right. So it is our plan, as I said in the opening remarks, we are committed to reporting back to you, give you a progress update quarterly, and part of that including any expenses that outside of the approved budget. So we are committed to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Then the second question is, prior to committee approval of a final implementation and funding plan, staff will supply the committee a prudent person opinion. What does that mean?
So the prudent person opinion, so again, at the second phase, again, should you approve the concept today, we'll go out to further explore these concepts to identify the capable partners and then work out what is the desired governance structure and economic interest. So once we have all the terms together, we'll hire an independent, the prudent person opinion, almost like an independent third party to comment on these details, the governance structure, the terms. So that's a prudent person opinion.
So like a third-party consultant?
Yes.
Outside consultant?
Yeah.
And then would the plan go out for an RFP? Or how would it be awarded, this general partner?
Okay, that will turn the PPO process, the selection of the PPO, I know there's an established procedure. I will turn to the more capable, more knowledgeable person. That would be...
So for the prudent person opinion, we have a pool of consultants that we could use for that, and we would bid that out. As far as finding a capable partner, at this point in time, we don't anticipate using an RFP process.
Okay. And then after you come back with an implementation and funding plan, would it necessitate another vote by this investment committee or not? It's very unclear.
I would say yes.
Okay, so that's what I would like to add. I would like to add that no new contracts are to be signed at this time. No new investment amounts are going to be allocated at this time of our investment pool.
So
we are not committing any retirement funds to a general partner at this time, and that after implementation and funding plan is established, you will come back and get another vote by this committee before moving forward. Those are the things that are unclear to me.
Yeah. So as I said in my opening remarks, that we'll come back to you for any needed revision of the investment policy. Should it outside of the should it be outside of a current delegated authority? So if it's outside the current delegated authority, we'll come back to you for revision of the investment policy.
Okay, so I just requested 4 things to be added for clarification. I don't know how others feel, but I think it would make me feel more comfortable having those specific items in there instead of us having to come back and revisit minutes if we heard something and didn't hear something. I just think it's better to put it in writing.
But let's go through and make sure what we're talking about. One I got was no commitment that funding investments will require a final vote by this committee.
Right.
Right? So that's one of them. Okay. Let's go one by one. Would the maker of the motion accept that as an amendment? All right. So that would go after the last sentence.
Okay.
No funding investments will require a final vote by the committee.
Okay.
All right. What were the other 3? Let's go through them and make sure we understand.
Mr. Meng said no new contracts were to be signed at this time.
Well, if there's no money to be spent.
But contracts sometimes cost money, and if they're going to sign contracts, then I just want to...
Sorry, so can I clarify? The contract again, go back to the investment or operating. So we will not sign any investment contract, but we may sign some operating contract. For example, if you require a PPO or outside consultant, or when we discover a certain topic that requires a deeper dive into the area, we may need some additional opinion, so that we may sign contract. But that's part of the discovery process, as I call it, as a operating expense. But we're not signing any contract on investment. We're not deploying any investment dollar. Just for clarification.
Okay. Let me add just a bit of clarity. Maybe it would help. Currently, the investment office in the private equity space spends effort, time, dollars, consultants, negotiating, travel, all sorts of things in order to fulfill the mandate of meeting the requirement for private equity. So the chair's view is the operational part of this, that exploratory operational part, is really no different than the current process that INVO uses to expend operational funds in the budget in order to explore particular private equity investments. So I think the motion includes that this shall be done within the existing INVO budget, excluding the actual investments. And we're saying it has to come back for a vote before there's actually any expenditure on investments.
Okay, so I just got here, so I don't know how much money gets spent doing these type of exploratory.
Let's find out.
So yes, and so if there are going to be contracts, and I'd like to say the committee will receive quarterly progress reports, including dollar amounts spent outside of the INVO or budget, since we are authorizing you all to move forward with pillars 3 and 4. We kind of like to know how much it's costing and not buried in a budget someplace.
Yeah, so this is Dan Bienvenu again. Maybe I can help a little bit on the budget. The way the process works here is that annually our budget comes to Finance and Admin, the Finance and Admin Committee of the board, and then the full board for approval. So we currently have an approved budget for fiscal year 18-19. That's the one that's in place now. And we're working our way through the process for coming up with our budget for 19-20. We're getting close, but we need to get it through the final sort of executive approval, and then that one too will come to Finance and Admin Committee and to budget for approval. So you will see the numbers. As far as letting you know any incremental contracts that are strictly for this, we can certainly include that in the quarterly reporting. We're happy to do that. I will say that things like staff time can be a little bit challenging to disentangle, whether this is working on this or working on that, but certainly explicit expenditures on pillars 3 and 4, whether it's contracting or otherwise, we can certainly include. And our goal will be to bring as much transparency to that as we can. And as I said, you will get to see the 19-20 budget when it gets proposed to Finance and Admin.
Okay. And then how about the vote by this committee before moving forward? Is that required?
I think I added that in the end, that no funding of investments will require a final vote by the committee.
Okay.
So.
And we would include any expenditures, Ken. If we were to, work our way through and get to a place where we thought that the 19-20 budget that again will be approved by this group were to become a constraint, we would certainly come back to you before we exceeded the budget.
Okay. And so I'm just asking, the committee will receive quarterly progress reports. I don't want to just hear what's happening, but also how much money is being spent pursuing this. So I would like to.
So if we said including external contract expenses, that would be sufficient? Would the maker of the motion accept that?
Yes.
Okay. In the second? Second. Okay. She accepts it too. All right. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, members.
All right, so we've got basically those two changes to the motion, all right, so far. Okay, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I want to thank Mr. Mong and the whole Calpers team, everybody that's touched this. This has been challenging, and I think a lot of the challenge has just been in how we communicate a concept. And that's the thing I really take home today is we're really focused on this at the concept level, and it's, for me personally, I tend to want to dive into, well, what about the details that we're still several steps away from? And most of my concerns have to do with, well, the devil could be in the details when we get to them, but we haven't got there yet, and without this approval, we don't get there. The other thing is I tend to sometimes say, well, wait a minute, even a bigger picture than the concept. Maybe we should be talking about, our whole allocation and private equity versus, but that's a different level of decision making the other direction, which is for a different time and a different discussion. And so you really helped me focus in on what is really before us right now. And that is, are we going to go forward and explore the potential for this? Are we going to delegate to staff and give staff the support to go forward and see, are there deals to be made? Is there something that we can work out the governance structure and the details that will help us have confidence that we'll make the kind of numbers we need to across the whole portfolio to get to that 7%. And in that context, I think that we really we need to go forward. We need to do what we can to explore those opportunities and those possibilities, because the status quo, I think, is unlikely to let us hit our targets. And so we'll certainly have that bigger picture discussion when we go back to our portfolio allocations. I'm kind of on record as saying I think we need more private equity over time in the long run, but that'll be a different discussion. We'll also get to discuss some of the devil in the details in that next phase when staff comes back to us and says, we think there's a deal to be made here, or we didn't find any opportunities this go around, but we'll keep looking. But for today, I see the future is looking for innovation, looking where we can take Calpers' unique strengths of scale and brand and reputation and market leadership and everything, and put them into play in a way that really no one else can. And so I'm in support for giving the team the opportunity to look and see what tools we can put on our tool belt, and ultimately we'll see whether we use them or need them or can. But without a positive decision today, we're just spinning our wheels and sitting with the status quo.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I just have two final questions I should have asked for the record. Is this an investment decision?
You mean today?
Yes.
I would say it's not an investment decision today.
Great. And for the record, what experts developed this strategy?
Both internal experts and external experts.
Yeah, I want their names. For the record, what experts developed this strategy? Consultants, staff?
So I think the internal, you're looking at us on the table, plus the private equity team and the head of real asset, Paul Machaka, and his team. So that's our internal expertise. External, I want to say from what I know, people like Larry Sassini and other well-established industry veteran investor in private equity. I know when being in conversation with people such as KKR, Blackstone, maybe I can leave John and Sarah to Hamilton Lane. So we talked to a number of highly respected industry experts as well, with our global peers, such as the Canadian fund, some of the Asian funds.
Thank you.
Mr. Rubalcaba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I really appreciate the presentation and all the work that's been done. I want to thank the CEO, the chief CIO, all the staff, both investment and compliance, and all your input in trying to clarify and bring a comfort level as it can be given the risk and mitigation efforts to this board. I also want to thank the fellow Calpers board members for their vigilance, and also the questions that were asked and the concerns expressed. I think the motion is finally amended, is very strong and provides a road forward. And I would call for the question, Mr. Chair.
Well, we can certainly do a roll call vote, but we have other board members who wish to speak, and I would want to hear from them first before we call the question. And we'll also hear from the public before there's a vote.
I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Mr. Perez.
Thank you for
So in my world, we live in we live in lanes, boxes. So it's difficult for me to reconcile voting on well, first let me say that I do support the team. We do need private equity. Ben, you continue to have my support. I'm 100% confident in you and your team. So I'm excited about that. This is exciting. My issue is voting on a concept. I wish there was another vehicle in which we could show that support as opposed to an action item. And I understand that that came from the committee. That's it. That's it.
Ms. Pasquale-Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ben and team, I want to thank all of you for the work that you've done and that you've put into this. I hope that what you hear is that we want to proceed to do the best that we can, to give you the tools to do the best that we can, but there's a lot of gray. So every step of the way, moving forward, being clear and extra clear is great. Things such as nuanced as, I think, I'm not sure, none of that. We want to get to as much detail as possible. It helps. It helps the board. Stay on course, but I just want to remind you that this is a step, and the rest of us, it's a step-by-step process. This today is just to allow you, right, to get to the next step and be as detailed. I just ask that you be as detailed as you possibly can each step of the way.
Yes, thank you. And to both your comment and Mr. Price's question, that's exactly the action we're asking the committee to take today so that we can go down to the next phase of this project. Then we have more details for you all, to be shared. And, we are committed to be very open, transparent, and clear communication with you every step along the way.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, just one additional comment, and I appreciate the operations that we have these lines of defense, and it's necessary in any organization. But ultimately, this committee and this board holds the CEO and the CIO accountable. So regardless of who signs that document down in that organization, we hold the CEO and subsequently the CIO responsible for this.
Okay, I don't have any further requests from committee members. We have a long list of people who wish to speak on this item as well as some later items. So what I'd like to do is take a 10-minute break. So we will start again at 10:38.